Hello and welcome to altPOV.radio. Our guest is Jeff Becker. Jeff has been a student of science most of his life. His worldview was actually turned upside down when he started investigating extraterrestrial contact and experienced undeniable telepathic interactions with lights in the sky. Jeff wasn't one to deny evidence, so he continued to seek contact, organized a group of like-minded individuals, and has had some amazing experiences ever since as a result. Jeff is a computer programmer and works remotely from his home near Bloomington, Indiana. He is a U.S. Navy veteran who was trained in and has taught naval nuclear power plant operation. He has an MS in computer science and has worked on various artificial intelligence projects and a robotics project for the International Space Station. Jeff was editor of and one of the authors of Paths to Contact, True Stories from the Contact Underground, and is part of the CE5 initiative, which describes is basically a way to also CE5 is a way to describe a fifth category of close encounters with extraterrestrial intelligence characterized by mutual bilateral communication. And Jeff has a lot of interesting stories to tell, and we're glad to have him on. So Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Well, let's, what I like to do with most of my guests is talk about how you first got into this, how you went down the quote-unquote proverbial rabbit hole with UFOs and extraterrestrial contact.
Well, I'm going to start kind of way back. Back in my 20s, when I was in the Navy, I ran across one of George Adamski's books, and it really got my attention. And I really hadn't tried much meditating or anything like that, but I went out to the coast near San Diego and sat down and said, thought anyway, take me. I want to, I'd like to have a ride on a spaceship.
Right.
So I think that's what a lot of people like to have. Interestingly enough, when I opened my eyes, I saw a red light moving very rapidly away down the coast. And at the time, I interpreted that as the afterburners of a jet, since there's a lot of military activity in that area. But as I remember it now, there really was no sound, and so maybe it wasn't a jet. But I had so little experience with other sorts of things appearing that at that time, it really didn't strike me as anything that might necessarily be unusual. Now, looking back, I think maybe it was. So that sort of got me started looking into other ways of looking at the universe. But I really didn't get into the CE5 activity until very recently. So, but every so often I check into UFOs for so I was in my 20s then, and that was in the 70s, and so.
So the 70s was an interesting time too with the UFOs.
Yeah.
There was a lot of flaps in a lot of different places. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I wasn't really that aware of it, and besides the Adamski book, I really didn't find very much. But I'd check every so often to see if there was something that was really convincing. Because pretty much everybody out there has detractors, including Adamski. I actually went up to Mount Palomar and went to the post office to see if he was around, and the guy at the post office said, he's just a fraud. And that sort of turned me off at the time because, I didn't know any better. But I kept checking every decade or so and tried to find something. And then in 2007, I ran across the Disclosure Project. And so I watched the main Disclosure Project video and then a lot of the witness videos, and that just floored me. It was a lot of very credible witnesses, military, government, FAA officials, all speaking on the record, willing to testify before Congress that they knew that there was an extraterrestrial presence. The organizer of that conference was Dr. Guru, and he had another program going on called CSETI. And so while I was convinced, I'm not one to take somebody's word for it for something so important. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll go and see if this is for real. And fully prepared to find out that, that we'd sit out there for a week and nothing had happened. Well, I got out there, and the very first night there was all kinds of activity in the sky, and I was just absolutely floored.
Right.
It was just astounding.
Well, I want to ask you, because your background, you're a computer programmer. You said you're a Navy veteran, and you also you're into science and computer programming, and I would imagine you tend to look at things objectively, and with a critical eye. So how did that affect the way you kind of approach this? Well,
my mindset going into this was very mechanistic. I'd studied artificial intelligence for my master's degree. That was in machine learning. And so my notion of intelligence and how the mind worked was that the mind was what the brain did. It was a mechanical process, a biological process. There was nothing more to it. There was no mechanism that supported anything like telepathy. And in a lot of these stories, there would be a downed craft, and the individual telling a story would be in telepathic communication with the beings in the craft. And this happened over and over again. So that really got my attention. It's like, okay, if this is true, everything I know is wrong.
Right.
And so then I had my own interactions, of course, after the CSAD training, and they were, to me, I was so totally convinced that there was something telepathic going on. My whole understanding of intelligence and consciousness was turned upside down, and it started the exploration that's still ongoing, trying to understand how this can be.
Right. Now, when you were in the Navy, was there anything? What was the prevailing attitude, if any, on this? Was there anything that happened while you were in the Navy, or did you did your thing in the Navy and then came out?
No, I just did my thing and came out. There was nothing that occurred to me while I was in the Navy that had anything to do with UFOs, except my own personal reading and outside activities.
Okay, so when you first, I want to know how you felt when you first saw, the first time you were at one of these things and you saw some of these objects. Can you describe not only what they look like, but first of all, how you distinguish them between what could be conventional craft or satellites or what have you, and then how you felt at that moment?
Yeah. Well, the first sighting, I guess would be the word, that happened was actually a response to a discussion going on in the group. And what it was a series of flashes, and they were at random points in the sky. So it's sort of like flash, 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 just jumping around. But not only was the location jumping around, but the apparent size was changing. So at one point it looked like a pinpoint, another time it looked like a dot. Changing sizes, changing, and just jumping around. It was like a dance. There's nothing up there that does that,
Right.
Airplanes go in a straight line; they flash 70 times a minute. Satellites go in an arc, which looks like a straight line when you're looking at a section of it. They can change brightness somewhat. They don't do that. They don't jump around. Nothing jumps around.
Right.
So that was pretty convincing.
Yeah. No. So you see something like that, and also too, if you could just clarify, the CE5. It's not just random. You don't just go out there and hope to see something. There's a concerted effort to communicate, correct?
Right. And this particular sighting had to do with one of Dr. Gru's regular contacts. At least that's the way it seemed from the reaction to the discussion in the group. A being called Kindness. And so, these regular contacts, they know that this is going on. They don't need a whole lot of encouragement to show up. But then, there are other times, there's a protocol for inviting contact, and that's part of what we learned during that week-long training. It's not complicated, it's not difficult, and it's mostly about consciousness.
Right. And then if I'm not mistaken, there's some meditation involved, or at least some a focused a silence or some kind of a focused effort.
Yeah, Yeah, the meditation is mostly a way of shutting down the extraneous noise, so that you're sending out it's like, if somebody banging pots and pans in the background and you're trying to yell over it. You want to shut down the pots and pans so that the message you're trying to communicate gets out. And likewise, when you're trying to listen, it's even harder to shut down the internal conversation, so that if somebody is trying to send you a message, you can actually receive it. And then it's harder still to distinguish that from your usual internal jabbering. But some of the things I've had that were most convincing to me that there was a communication going on were not received messages. It was a physical response in the sky to something I had requested.
Right. And you live in Indiana now, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So at this time, you have there are CE5 groups in different areas of the country. So do you lead the one that's in that area of Indiana? Right.
So the CSATI training I went to was in the fall of 2008, and then spring of 2009 I started a group. And I just looked around for some people in the area who had been to CSATI training, and they introduced me to some other people, and it just sort of got going very quickly. And then CSATI also helped me over the years by introducing other people to me to join the group. And now there were networks set up, online maps, various ways for people to get in touch. And so there's a constant trickle of new members coming in that just, they just find you somehow.
Right. Right. People seek each other out in that,
yeah, they do,
especially in this field. So what would you say is really the ultimate goal with this kind of initiative? Is it, well, I know it's an extremely peaceful way. The way it's looked at is that this is a peaceful communication, that this is a very positive thing. What is, yes. Is the ultimate goal to get to a point where there's a mass shift in the way people think, perhaps, or what is the goal?
Well, there's it's kind of actually a very, very huge goal, which will have to proceed through a number of very gradual steps. So really the first step is getting people to understand that a lot of what they think is true is not. So it's a matter of opening minds to possibilities. Then another part of that is we're in the process of destroying this planet. There are technologies out there that would be of great help. If people have studied how UFOs work, even there's a NASA scientist whose book I read recently, he's studied UFO sightings and come up with a theory as to how the propulsion works. And they're not using rockets. They're not using rocket fuel. They're not using fossil fuels. They're using something else that's a lot better. And so if we had that sort of technology, our energy is a huge proportion of the cost of anything. So we obviously could save a great deal of money on energy if we had that sort of technology. However, at our current standard of ethics and thought, having that kind of power may be worse than not having it, because it would give us the ability to destroy the planet even faster. So it's a tough thing to say, well, yeah, we'd really like to get past fossil fuels and onto something better, but will we do the right thing with it? That's probably the most important question. Maybe a lot of this technology can be weaponized. I'm fairly certain it can be. I mean, just having a craft that can perform like a UFO performs would be quite a weapon, and there's quite a bit of evidence that the military has looked into that sort of thing. And so just we have to reach a level of ethics and responsibility that we can deal with that kind of power. So, it's the big Spider-Man question.
Right, right. No, that's true.
Right.
But it applies, right? Exactly.
But it applies, I mean, nuclear power is harmful enough. And we haven't really done the best job with that. We've built reactors that have destroyed large amounts of real estate, created huge messes. The atmospheric testing program had repercussions that are still happening. So our ability to behave well with technological power has yet to be proven.
Right. And you have a very I find your background interesting, and I find that it would be beneficial for this type of, when you're with a group of people who all have the same, they're trying to do something, it's an initiative. And I'm sure you've met people from all different types of backgrounds who are doing this, and especially over the years, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But your background is, I find interesting, because you understand nuclear power, you understand technology from that standpoint, and I find that it's very interesting the way you kind of describe how, we're not there, we're not mature enough perhaps to handle it in a proper way, which is true based on what's been happening in the world over the course of the last several decades. But let me ask you this: what do you think, from what you can tell, what do you think that the extraterrestrials either want from us, if they want anything at all from us, or expect from us, or hope from us, and as that also relates to communication?
Okay. I've actually met somebody who I'm convinced is not from here, who's living on Earth as human. And what she was trying to teach was raising of consciousness, raising of vibration, to the point where we could meet the ETs halfway, so that we were at a point where we could communicate with them. So there's this whole thing that falls under spirituality, but maybe that's it sometimes comes across as a fluffy term, but there's some practical aspects of that, which, and I have I can't say I'm the best practitioner by a long shot, but by maintaining your state of being in a high level of loving and joyful feelings, you can get to a point where other gifts start to come into play. So most communication with those from other places is going to be telepathic. It's not through spoken language, although they're quite capable of delivering messages in our language, because I've experienced that as well. And that was telepathic, but
and we will get to that.
That's not the preferred way of doing things. They want us to meet them halfway, and that was expressed fairly clearly. And this person gave a workshop on just that. So I think that's what they're looking for. They want us to meet them halfway, so then they can start to. That's really a first step to be able to communicate telepathically, is the first step, so that they can then teach us more.
Right.
And so, this general feeling of caring for everybody, that automatically takes care of a lot of the ethical issues, right? If you understand that every person out there is another instance of you through this shared consciousness, then you start thinking differently about how you're going to behave towards other people. So there's a lot of discovery, a lot of rethinking about what people are and how we relate to each other that needs to go on. And it's it starts with realizing that they're there. They're not going away.
Well, and I wonder though too,
they're willing to show up for us,
which they obviously are. And I think, but I also think when you say us, I look at it as us. When I say the common man, I think it's a bad way to describe that, but the masses, the people, not necessarily governments, not necessarily the power brokers of the world, but us, just us as a mass, en masse, as a human race. I think, because I get the impression through everything I've read and researched is that obviously they've attempted to, and either attempted to or are communicating with leaders, governments, in some capacity, perhaps. But I don't know if that's worked out very well. So, and I think that, do you see that that perhaps maybe this is a different way to say when we're going to communicate, but we want to communicate with the human beings, the human race as a whole, to get that, to put our consciousness at a higher level through numbers, through that, to make that paradigm shift occur.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the contact movement is a very grassroots effort, and turning that into some sort of top-down organized thing, I just don't think is necessarily a good way. Networking for sure is a good thing to have happen, so people can get in touch with each other. But putting somebody in charge as the leader and guru of all this stuff is, we've had enough trouble with bad leaders and everything.
Exactly.
That we need to learn something about personal responsibility and making things happen without having to say, "Oh, well, nobody told me to do this,"
Right.
So I'm not going to do it. So it's a matter of personal initiative getting this going, and I'm really happy to see some young men and women out there who are really going for it. They're really making things happen as far as starting contact groups and getting the word out to the public and their friends and neighbors. And it just in the few years I've been in this, the growth is obvious. So yeah.
And that's great, and that's exactly what needs to happen. And now, over the years, by doing this, you've obviously met a lot of fascinating people. You just mentioned one particular lady who you think is not even. I have to ask, what made you think that she was perhaps not who you thought she might be?
That's kind of a long story. I don't know if I want to tell the whole thing. It happened at the November 11, 2011 Star Knowledge Conference. She was a friend of another CSETI member, Charlie Baylog. And they arranged at that conference to give 2 talks. She gave basically a coming out talk saying who she was, and Charlie backed her up. And they'd known each other for a number of years, and the story of how they met is kind of extraordinary. And that's actually, there was a conference back in April, and it's all recorded, and I'm hoping to get that up on YouTube eventually. I'm kind of busy, so I haven't been very fast about getting those videos up there, but more of that story will be there. But yeah, and so and she gave workshops, and actually I had a fair amount of personal interaction with her and another lady who was close to her twin, who went by the name of Star, by the way. And there's just a lot happened that convinced me, and I really, I don't want to go into all the details, but
right. Yeah, but you meet all of these people, and you sometimes run into some very interesting individuals. Let's talk a little about some of the profound experiences you've had since getting involved in this that have changed you as a person and as a human being. And let's just start with some of the. We mentioned already a sighting or two from the standpoint of what they were like, what they look like, and how that convinced you that they were different from conventional craft or satellites or things like that. But tell us a little bit about some of the more profound experiences you've had since being involved in this.
I'll start with one that was actually before I went to CSETI training, and it was the point at which I became convinced that I didn't know anything. That everything I knew was wrong, basically. And I spent an entire day laughing, and I couldn't stop because what I was laughing about was that everything I knew was wrong. My whole view of the materialistic functioning of the world and all that, it was just wrong. There was so much more that had not been open to. But I spent the entire day laughing, and after that, it was hugely transformative. And after that point, I don't know how to describe it. It was like glowing for weeks after that. It was amazing. And then like the first time I tried the CSATI protocols was also like warming up for the training. I went out on my back porch and was doing the protocol, which basically involves visualizing, zooming out into space, trying to form some sort of connection, zooming back in, showing them your location on Earth just by visualizing it. And that actually works. But what I did at that point was I zoomed out into space and I left a message. Don't ask me why I thought I could leave a message. And I said, well, I have to go to bed now, but if you get this message, come by and knock. And zoomed in and say, this is where I am. So I went to bed and I was startled awake by a very loud on the side of the house.
Wow.
I mean, I jumped out of bed. My heart was beating. I went out to the back door and looked out, and there's nothing there. And it's one of those things where you wonder if you dreamed it, but how could you possibly dream that?
It startled you awake, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I forget if it was the next day or the day after that. There was a helicopter came by. There are helicopters that come by here a lot, where we seem to be between two bases, and there's the National Guard, the green helicopters that are kind of rounded, and they fly by a lot. This one came by maybe 100 feet up. It was low. I could see the earphones on the helmet of the guy in the front seat, and it's like, and my wife waved, and I just looked up and said, "What the, what's going on here?"
Wow. And they were just checking.
It looked like, my impression was they were checking. Yeah.
Wow. So when you the first thing that happened that made you realize that everything you knew, you thought you knew, you didn't know. What exactly happened then?
The main thing that had to do with was telepathy. For me, that's sort of the game changer. If the mind is not the functioning of the brain, then we are a lot more than a biological machine. There's much more to us. We probably are not mortal. It would be possible for us to exist outside our body. And I read up on things like Robert Monroe and Monroe Institute, and he has a program for out-of-body experiences, which I've not managed to achieve, but a lot of people have. And so the whole game is consciousness. And what does that mean? What is consciousness? And I've been trying to develop my own theory of that, and it's and certainly there are a lot of old traditions out there that would have other explanations or maybe similar explanations. But as near as I can tell, consciousness is fundamental. If you look at what the ancient yogis could do, what seems to be possible if you develop your mind, teleportation, telekinesis, telepathy, all these things. How is that possible unless everything, all matter is somehow fundamentally comes from consciousness? So that's sort of where I'm at right now, is trying to understand that.
And that this ties into that directly. So,
absolutely.
Have you ever thought to yourself, I'm sure you have, but what are they? Do you think that there are several things going on here, or do you think that they're more interdimensional, interplanetary, light beings? There's certainly some sort of physicality here,
yeah.
Obviously. But what would you? I know it's a loaded question, but what thoughts go through your head on that?
It's a big universe, and my take on it is all of the above. There obviously are physical beings who can travel in physical craft. We're an example. If we've developed spacecraft using T. Townsend Brown's technology he patented a gravitator. So if we have gravitationally powered or propelled spacecraft, then we could be going out into space at something close to the speed of light, and very mechanical craft as physical beings. So there's an example that there's probably some of that going on. There are probably other beings a little more advanced than us that are traveling around in physical spacecraft as physical beings. There are very advanced people on Earth who travel through teleportation, and there's plenty of evidence through other people's writings and from my contact with this person who's not from here, who says, they don't. One of the things she told me is they don't need spacecraft; those are for us. That they travel by other means. They travel through teleportation. So
back to that woman again, right? It's interesting.
Well,
Let me ask. I got to ask you one thing. Did she look different? What did she look like? Did she look different, or was she just an average-looking person?
Short, and if I had to place it, I would say South American indigenous. But she lived and worked with Native American people for quite a number of years. She was actually raised by a not Native American family, and I'm hoping she's going to get a book out sometime. And I know she's done interviews, and maybe she'll interview with you. I don't know. She's kind of particular about who she interacts with, but
very interesting.
Yeah.
You actually had. I guess it was last April in Roswell. There was a conference. Can you tell us about that? There was some kind of a contact conference, and some interesting things happened there.
Right. So Paula Shirley, who's one of the contributors to the book Past the Contact, bought a building in Roswell and this is not all that common for people that fall into this and or get attracted into this and. It kind of takes over your life and becomes the most important thing, and it is because we're kind of out to change the world. And so she bought this place. Her idea was to educate people about the peaceful intentions of the extraterrestrials and to hold conferences. And so the Past Contact conference was the first one she put together. It was in April. We had Sergeant Clifford Stone, who's one of the disclosure witnesses, came in and hosted. He actually lives in Roswell, so he gave a number of interesting talks. We went out into the stars several nights. There was some activity in the sky. It wasn't as outward as some people would like, but it was obvious if you know what you're looking for. And it was a good conference, and we met. The big thing there is meeting people and getting together with like-minded people and just sort of building that energy. So a number of the people obviously who were speaking were authors from Past the Contact, and so one of the I guess the most important players in the CE5 movement right now, Costa McCreese, he gave a very nice talk. He is actually organizing something called UFOcontact.com, and it started out as the Global CE5 Initiative. So he has communication with groups all over the world, and one night a month, everybody goes out, does their contact work, and then they report back whatever happened to the website he set up. And so that's a very cool thing that's going on. And he has another conference coming up in August. Dr. Joseph Burks, who's another one of the authors, gave a couple of very nice talks. He he started one of the first CE5 groups ever. That was back when Dr. Greer would actually come out and help groups get started, which it may have been the only time. But he got that started in the Los Angeles area, and that went on for a number of years. Lots of interesting sightings and a fair amount of military activity around him because they didn't know what was going on and kind of wanted to keep track of what they were doing.
Right.
But that was a good conference. I think it's going to happen again next year, and I hope we get a good turnout.
No, good. That sounds like it would be a lot of fun to do that. One of the things that comes up, and when I talk to people, especially when I talk to people about disclosure and the CE5 initiative, that is a very positive based outlook on contact. And what do you do when you come across people? And I'm sure you do, because you're at a lot of events and you're meeting a lot of people. There are people out there who, and some deservedly so, and some have every reason to feel this way, that there's also a negative view. There's a negative view of alien contact from the standpoint of abductions, cattle mutilations, manipulation, and people who apparently say that who have been abducted. It's not the most pleasant experience by any means, and I know that it's hard for me. I look at everything, and I personally, of course, and most of us, if not all of us, would like to think that it's all very positive, and that these beings, whoever they might be, are here for our benefit, and we can communicate. And it's next step in our evolution is to communicate with them and become part of this galactic community. And how do you react, or what do you say to people when you get into those conversations about, well, yeah, but wait a minute, I was abducted, or my husband was abducted, and how do you talk to them about that? What's your view on that?
Well, first of all, I've never had any experience like that, so I can't personally say that it happens, and I can't say that it doesn't happen. So you have to, I kind of like to take people at their word. If they think this happened, then something happened. The problem then is the interpretation. We have an interesting view of personal rights that that our will should somehow not be violated, and if somebody does something against our will, then that's a crime against us. Maybe from a bigger perspective, something else is going on. Maybe from a bigger perspective, they already gave permission and they don't know about it. If we're multidimensional beings ourselves, there may be more to us than we know about, and maybe what I am is more than I think I am. So it becomes a very complicated question when you bring that stuff in. But another way of looking at it is I had this cat. This cat was a terror. The vet had her file marked as vicious. Now, this was a perfectly fine cat at home, but when we take the cat into the vet, it'd be in there. The cat would be all nice and purring on the table. The vet would open the door, and the cat would go absolutely psycho. And one time that happened, the cat ran up my arm, crawled on top of my daughter's head, and when I tried to take her off my daughter's head, bit me in the hand through leather gloves so hard it drew blood. Well, the cat thought it was going to die. For the cat, going to the vet was a negative experience. It was the worst thing that could ever happen, and it's absolutely terrifying. But the vet, had to administer medicine. We had to put her in a box and gas her to knock her out in order so that the vet could work on this cat. Well, there's, it's for the people that have had long-term contact, there are people that have come to terms with what happens and begin and start to see it from a bigger perspective. And at first some of these people have been terrified. Judy Carroll's one, and there was another book I read recently of a lady that's had a lifetime of contact, started out terrified, and eventually came to understand that, basically she was visiting her family and they were working with her in various ways. But a lot of the memory doesn't come back to our normal conscious life. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it leaks in little bits that are terrifying. Sometimes I'm a little more leaks in, and they start to get the picture that something more is going on than just I'm being abducted and something horrible happens and I'm brought back and I've got a scar. So.
Right, it's perception. From that's a great analogy too, because you take that cat analogy, and obviously the cat's horrified, but for you and your family, you're doing a good thing for the cat. You're taking the cat in to be checked out. It's for health, health, to keep her healthy, him or her healthy. And obviously there's other things going on with abductions, but that's interesting from perhaps their perspective, that what might seem terrifying to us, at least at first, is really not. and should
Well,
be
it's
looked at.
certainly terrifying. I mean, the people are they seem to be scared out of their wits, and they just and it's very hard for them to come to terms with. And they're, I mean, I've been reading some of the older stories about UFO sightings from the 50s and 60s, and there would be people that would see one of these things in the woods, and they'd get out their gun and start shooting. Now, how intelligent is that? Just, you see a craft that's technologically so far advanced that we can't even conceive of how it works. They probably have the ability to snuff you out in a microsecond, and you're gonna go start hurling hunks of lead at great speed at it.
Right,
You
right.
hear them bounce off the hill. So people don't always react well to the unknown.
Right.
In fact, they routinely and predictably react badly and with terror.
Right. Well, fight or flight, a primitive response, fight or flight.
Exactly. Yes.
Boom. There you go.
So that's part of why the introduction has to be gradual.
Right.
You got to get used to the idea that they exist. Start to accept the notion that they're not going to come out. They're not coming to eat us. They have other ways of doing things like that.
Right. Right. There's the Twilight Zone stuff. I mean, we've been programmed because of our culture and because the TV shows and the movies that we've been, subjected to over the years.
Part of that is things that give you an adrenaline rush or good entertainment. So
right.
scaring you, horror movies even without aliens have always been good entertainment. Horror movies with ETs, sure, that's entertainment.
Right.
Maybe there's, some organization that influences Hollywood to do more of the horrifying ET stories. Maybe there isn't. Who can say? There's some people that say that they do that sort of thing. The CIA or whoever it is influences Hollywood, but it doesn't matter. They're still going to do scary stories.
Right. Right. That's a part of the money-making machine. I've heard people, I've never seen this myself, but people who have done these contact sessions, if you will, you describe some of what these things look like. Okay, where they could be small dots, white dots or yellow dots or what have you, and then they can be bigger and they'll become brighter and then they'll dim bright. They'll do certain things. I've also heard that there's sometimes where they'll be flying in formations. There'll be more than one. There'll be several. Have you ever seen that at all?
Not in something that I wasn't pretty sure was just a satellite. There's actually a set of satellites that were deployed called the NOSS system, or they actually deployed them in groups of 3. So sometimes people will see those and think that they're seeing something that's ET, and it's not necessarily. I haven't personally seen anything I would say was coordinated flight. I have seen things close enough that I know that they're not. I had landmarks that I could use to judge distance and kind of estimate size. And one of those, I was getting up very early to go out to the woods to look for mushrooms, which is one of my hobbies. And it was foggy and it was still twilight. And I got to the end of my driveway, and just as I was turning, there's a building, there's a barn, and then there's sort of a setback where there's some trees. And right in that spot, there was this big disc of light that showed up. And I could see the wisps of fog drifting in front of it. And it's like, and I just stopped, and I didn't even know what to think. I was not expecting that at all. And I was just sort of agog for a week after that, trying to figure out what that was and how I might have reacted differently at the time. But it's like, oh, that's not supposed to be there. Let's see.
Right.
And I checked out all the lights around there for a week before there's 2 of them, before I told anybody even that I'd seen this, because I just wanted to be sure. But it was about bigger than the full moon, across the field, about 300 yards, and it would have been about a 30-foot disc. And from my perspective, it was a perfect circle, perfectly illuminated, evenly illuminated white light. And that's consistent with a lot of the things I've seen. They have this very pure white light. When you look at an incandescent light, there's a glare to it. There's no glare to these things, none. It's all I can say is it's different. You see it, you'll know it's different. The things I've seen, they tend to be perfectly round discs, no features. I don't know if it's a craft. I don't know if it's something they've manifested into space that emits light for a period of time. I know it shows up, it's gone, there's no sound.
Right. So you've never seen details in a craft. Mostly it's been just lights, correct?
Lights, but lights with size, with a fair amount of size, and lights that are close, and obviously very, very close. Because another time I saw under low clouds, this was, I guess it was very cloudy night. That it was almost like fog that would lift off the ground. It was just above treetops. And I was on my back porch, and this disc of light comes zipping by from north to south right overhead, just barely inside the cloud cover. Perfectly silent, very fast. And then it came by again, off in a different direction, and it made a, and again, this was not a point, this was under low clouds, it was a disc. And it was on for a while, off, then back on. So it was like a streak, a gap, a streak.
Right.
And these are things I had been requesting for a long time, to see something closer and to see something that was undeniable and not possibly a meteor or a satellite or anything. It's under low clouds. It doesn't get a whole lot more undeniable than that. Might be nice to see portholes and things like that, but you certainly know that this is not anything usual.
Right. And there's a list of things that there's a checklist of things that it can't be, that it's not, in other words. So that's part of the protocol, is that, it's not a satellite, it's not a plane, it's not, the protocol for it is pretty strict. That's what I've heard. Right.
And, it really takes a bit of education to not make, well, there are a couple of different ways of getting false positives. One is you don't know enough, so that you see something in the sky, and it's the lightest moving, you say, oh, that's ETs. The other way is you've seen so much, you know they're there, you know it could be ET, and you see something unusual and think, oh, that's ET because I know they can be there. So, I mean, coming from both the knowing too little and knowing too much position, you can still get false positives.
Right.
But so you just have to be really careful. We were out in the working group just last year, and this big light came over, and we were getting all excited. And I looked at my application of satellites timings, and I couldn't. I thought, well, okay, it's something that bright. It's got to be the space station. I looked, and I couldn't find it. And then I double checked, and I saw that I'd been traveling, and the location that I plugged in the app was for a different part of the country. And so once I corrected the app for my current location, I found out that that was the space station.
Okay, well that happens, right?
And so then I have to email everybody and say, sorry guys, that was the space station. But you got to do that. You got to check yourself, because it's just a little too easy to in your enthusiasm.
Oh, sure, absolutely. And I was going to ask you, what kinds of reactions do you see from people? I would imagine, because I know how I would react, and I know how I have reacted at certain things, but it's got to, for some people, it has to be such a joyful thing that I guarantee they would just cry. I mean, just a verification for them. And I know that's not why people should do this. I should point this out, because I remember speaking with Ricky Butterfass about this. The intention is not to if you go out there with I want to see something, I want to see something, it's got to be more than that. There's got to be a sense of purpose there. It can't just be about seeing something. So I think it's important for listeners to understand that. But having said that, for people who have never seen anything like that, and then they do, and you know for sure it's not a conventional. You go through the checklist and there it is. It's something else. Tears of joy. I mean, what do you get?
Most people are very excited, very happy, and very grateful. There's a strong sense of gratitude that here's somebody that doesn't have any real need to be here or respond to us in any way at all, and they are. And you know, I've had this happen so many times. It's just kind of phenomenal how generous and kind and understanding they are for our ridiculous, selfish requests. To see them.
Yeah, well, when you think about it, right, they probably have better things to do, probably. Or maybe this is or again, it could be that this is we're very important to them, obviously, for various reasons. But
they understand our relationship far better than they do, or than they understand our relationship far better than we do. But I had one person who came out who really wasn't ready. She actually came out to visit with an Indian teacher who visited with the group, and she was sitting out and looked up, and it was clouds with little holes between the clouds. And when you look at a star through moving clouds, you sometimes think the star is moving. So she looked up, saw a star through the moving clouds, and thought, "Oh my God, it's a UFO!" And she was scared. She was very afraid, and it was a star. So.
Did she calm down, or how did the?
Oh, I think she ended up leaving. And
some people are not; they're just not ready.
Some people are not ready. A large proportion of the people, from my experience, who get into this have had a sighting in their childhood quite often, and so they've known for a long time that they're out there, and they just want to get with other people and form that connection, and hopefully invite our star friends to come visit, and because it's always fun when they do. But as far as their attitude about this, I'm going to tell about one other experience. This was at a Rio Rico conference with Dr. Greer, and this was the second one I'd gone to, and it seemed like in the second conference, the amount of sightings was lower, that there just wasn't that much going on in the sky. And so I was kind of disappointed, and I was just asking and asking and asking over and over and over again to please show something, please show something. And so late one evening, we went into a group meditation. And my mind quieted down, and I feel this presence. And I get this message, like you talking to me through the earphones. There are more important things than seeing us. Do you understand?
Really?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, in that tone too. Was it kind of like, hey, like
this was like a very strict teacher, your sensei, telling you there are more important things than seeing us. Do you understand?
What did you do?
The clearest communication I've ever had, telepathically like that, was the ETs telling me to shut up.
There you go. You're making too much noise. Shut up. Listen. Wow, that's impressive. I like that. That's that's funny. As clear as day too, right? It just came right to you.
Yeah, it's clear, and it was shocking. It was shocking.
Right. Well, you just had in Albany. You had discussed with me that you recently had something happen. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. So there's a contact group out there run by Marilyn, and I'm going to mess up her name. Givak, spelled Gewacke. But she's been doing this for quite a few years, very successful, lots of sightings, a really wonderful group. And she put on what she called the contact intensives, and invited people from all around to come visit. And so I went out there because I had wanted. She had initially expressed some interest in contributing to the Paths to Contact book, but it didn't work out. So I wanted to meet her and find out a little more about how she ran her group and how it all worked. And so, and it was just kind of a wonderful time of people getting to know each other and interact in different ways. And one of the exercises was we put on these masks, this kind of a plastic mask with no features, a plain white mask with just eye holes and little mouth hole. And one of the things we were doing was trying to we made up a little name card, and we're going to be an ET, and write on our card who we were as an ET and where we were from and what our name was and that sort of thing. And then walk around with a card, and we just sort of interact as if we were meeting an ET for the first time. It's just sort of just that kind of exercise. It was really kind of profound for what it was. And for my part, I decided to be a dolphin being with an unpronounceable name from a water planet that doesn't have an Earth name. And this relates back to a meditation I'd had at another Sea City training in Marco Island, where in a meditation, we were asked to go to whatever planet we were drawn to, and I was drawn to a water planet. And so I just thought I'd kind of tie that in to the whole thing. And then that night we were out under the stars, and one lady said she felt the presence of dolphin beings, and two other people said they had felt the same thing. And then almost immediately there was a constellation called Delphinus, the dolphin. It's kind of a diamond, and it has a tail, and it looks like a dolphin. And so right then there was a sequence of flashes right into the dolphin constellation. Just flash, 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 flash. And so that was one of the one of the better combinations of occurrences. In that actually the sky was very active that night. It was about as active as I've ever seen it in any training anywhere. So it was really, really quite good.
And this is in Albany?
Yeah, so it's near Albany. It's up in the Berkshire Mountains.
Okay. Yeah, that is profound to see the lights like that.
But that's fairly typical of this sort of CE5 group activity. Is the responses you get are often responses to some conversation going on in the group or some observation that's gone on in the group. And it seems to be quite often that if you make an observation that the ETs agree with, then there'll be a reaction in the sky.
Right. It's like almost like a confirmation.
Yes, it's a confirmation. I've seen quite a lot of that, actually.
Well, tell us about the book, Paths to Contact. How did that come about?
Well, this was the winter following that 11/11 conference, where I was so flabbergasted to meet a person not from around here. I was just sort of full of all this energy and didn't quite know what to do with it.
We're back to that lady again.
Yeah, no, well, she's had a little
interesting
bit of an effect
person.
on me.
Yeah, no, that's what happens.
And so it's just sort of like, this idea came out and hit me on the side of the head. It's like, okay, it'd be good to have a book that's just from regular people and their experiences. And I didn't want it to just be about what the ship looked like or what the beings looked like or what the sighting was, but more about the person and how all of this affected them. So the book is it's a set of short autobiographies, because most of the people wrote their own chapters, and I did the editing. Some people is a combination of interview and writing and things like that. But so I just kind of got clobbered with this idea, and I went on to Facebook and other places and sort of floated the idea, hoping people would say no, because I I work full time, and I don't, I enjoy my spare time, and this was going to be kind of a big project, and so I was hoping that the reaction would be not interested. Well, it turned out that the reaction was very, very positive, and I got over 20 people responding very quickly, and it turned out to be just a really nice, balanced group from different walks of life, different perspectives, different ages, different amount of time with this sort of activity. Some had just very recently started, some had been doing it for years. So it all kind of worked out nicely. Some people had started organizations like Custom Crease and Greg Sullivan. It just all worked out. And so I spent the next year pestering people to give me input and get their part done so I could do my part to get it all together and get it together as a book.
That's great. And how can people tell people how they can get a copy of the book or where to go as far as the site, all that?
There was a site called, let's see if we can get this up here. So it's
there you Paths to Contact.
Paths to Contact.
Wow, look at that. Okay. Yes.
This is from the conference. Paths to Contact, without spaces, pathstocontact.org is the website, and there are links from the website to Amazon. You can find Paths to Contact just going onto Amazon and searching. It's also available as a Kindle book, which is seems to be the way a lot of people like to get it.
Okay, and there's also a Facebook group, Paths to Contact?
There is a Facebook group called Paths to Contact. So please stop by. There's a lot of people posting on there, and it's good stuff. And if there's bad stuff, I weed it out as quickly as I can. So
right. And you so tell us now, like, where, so is there a plan for another book, but what's moving forward? What would you like to accomplish now that you've come this far on your journey? What's next for you? What do you feel like you need to do, you want to do?
The idea that seems to be grabbing me right now is looking at helping people who are starting groups do the best job they can. And so what I'm thinking about is talking to the successful working group leaders around the world, like Maryland. There's a group in Australia, CDRG. They have a good track record. Custom Crease has a good group. And there's just a lot of people around that are doing good things, getting good results. And so the idea would be to ask them for exercises, tips, tricks. How do you get a group started? How do you keep it going? How do you get people to pay attention and not be jabbering constantly? Get focused on the task at hand. And so it's kind of like a help for people that want a working group to get it going and have it really be successful, to get
right, do it the right way.
Do it the right way, do it well, and just take advantage of lessons learned for many years by people who have been doing this for quite a while.
And is there a way for people to, if they are interested in starting, if there's not already a group in their area and they're really interested in perhaps leading a group, starting a group in the area that they live, what would they do?
There are two maps right now. One is through CSETI. They have a contact network map of people, and that's I believe that's a free tool. And I probably have a link on the resources page on my website. I'll have to check and make sure I have that. I'm pretty sure I do. The other is through Custom Creases group, and UFOcontact.org. It's a few dollars. It's like $20 a year or something like that to join up. And there's a large network there. It's well worth supporting. So you can get in touch with people that way. There's a Facebook group called the CE5 Initiative, has quite a few members, and so you can go on that Facebook group and just ask around. You can get on my Facebook group, Paths to Contact, ask around. There are a lot of people there who will help you find people in your area. So there are a number of different ways.
Okay, and intention is a very important aspect of this, correct?
Yeah, I have a shaman friend who basically, he's been training with all these old shaman types, and his understanding is that there's all these sort of techniques people have for doing things, and really what it comes down to is intention. Intention is key. That we think about of course there's the notion of having good intentions, which is essential for ET contact, which is the notion of having this strong pure desire to make something happen is the first step in making it happen.
Okay, good. Very important. Let me ask you this, and you've had these experiences now, you've been doing this. From a personal standpoint, what would you like to see eventually happen with these ETs? In other words, I don't want to say end game because nothing ever really ends, but a development, the future development of this. What would be the, for you, logical and next steps for not only contact but further communication, and ideally, what would you like to see?
Well, I'd like to see open contact, but that's going to be a process just to get to the point where it's not going to panic everybody. And so the CE5 initiative groups, getting people to understand that they're here, that they're not going to be harmful to us, is that first baby step to just achieving a little bit of acceptance. Open contact, I'm not quite sure. In fact, I have absolutely no idea what the requirements will be for that. I don't know what percentage of the population have to be ready before they'll do it. I don't know what other conditions there are, but I'd really like to see it. I think it would help if the military doesn't try to throw nuclear bombs at them or shoot them or something like that. Right. I think that's most certainly a requirement. So getting acceptance from world leaders will be a big step, because I think most of them don't want this. It will disrupt their jobs. May make them irrelevant.
Yes. Do we need the acceptance of world leaders? Oh, that's a good question. Do we need that in order to make this happen?
I think as long as they're in control of the technology, they're in control of, probably.
Okay.
I kind of don't think that the ETs are going to move in and do something overt. It just, from everything I've seen, they just don't work that way. It's like,
right.
It's like good parenting. You don't do everything for your kids. You make them clean up their messes themselves, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a great analogy, and wonder at what point would they interfere if they had to. But I always wonder that. I always wonder if we got to a point of no return with global warming. Let's just put that out there. Would they become more aggressive, less passive in the way that they are? Would they interfere? Would they come in and say, you know what, enough?
I think that's possible. Certainly Dr. Greer has stated that that's possible, that it's more likely that if we reach a point where Earth is destined to become uninhabitable by any life form, if we continue, that they'll make changes. We may not be changes we particularly like. And certainly there has been plenty of evidence from people who have taken care of our nuclear weapons that the ETs don't care for our nuclear weapons and will, in fact, interfere with them. So I think that's another way they might do something overt.
Right. I tell people now, this is funny, Jeff, over the years, I remember, growing up in the 80s especially, I was in my 20s, I was impression was the Cold War was very, very real to me. We were all aware of Reagan was president's big threat of nuclear holocaust. And it's funny now, after having again gone down this rabbit hole, done so much research, and spoken to so many people, that when people start talking about that now, it's like, what happens even if there's an accident or a missile is accidentally launched? And I always say to people now, they'll never let that happen. And there's like, who'll never let that happen? And I'm like, they'll never let it happen. If something like that would be stopped. And of course, I have nothing to back that up with. But it's just from what I gather, it's just an intuition saying that it wouldn't go that far, wouldn't get that far.
Possible.
Right. Well, we don't know for sure, but right, possible. And you have a clear understanding of nuclear energy, and I'm sure you've spoken to military people at nuclear missile sites. There's has been a lot of interference from UFO craft in the sky that just they shut it down. And I've also read and heard stories about different rockets that we launch into space, and if there's something that's shouldn't be in space, we're not getting it into space. And this is at least what I'm hearing and gathering.
I'm hearing similar stories. But then there's things, like Chernobyl happened, Fukushima happened, so they don't save us from all of our self-made disasters either. Right. The nuclear test program went on for quite a while. There's, Hiroshima and Nagasaki got bombed, so they didn't immediately stop everything. Right. But of course, obviously, there's also the interpretation that once we started exploding these things, that's when the ET showed up for us. Right. That's when the presence became a lot more obvious to a lot more people.
Exactly. What would you say to someone who is where you were 30 years ago? Someone who has an educated person who has a strong understanding of science, has a particular way that they look at things because of science. What would you say to them?
Well, there's a danger with being really smart and very educated and knowing a lot of science. And the danger is that you think you know everything. And when you think you know everything, you've created a box that says everything that exists is only what I know. It's in this box, which I have learned. And so I know everything, and nothing outside the box is real. It can't exist because I don't understand it. I haven't been taught it. It's not part of science. Well, I'm here to tell you that there's a lot outside the box, and it's real.
And you laughed all day because you found that out a long time ago. So
it really expands your horizons. When your attitude is that you know everything, and you can say, oh, that's pseudoscience, that can't exist because it doesn't agree with scientific principle. You have now established science as your personal religion. You have made it dogma. You have said, you know everything that is, and nothing outside of what I know is real, and I can deny it. Well, it's a big universe. It's a big multiverse, possibly, which is within science. And how do you know that you know everything? Well, and in fact, if you look at physics knows that it does not know everything. So pretending like physics knows everything is immediately misrepresenting where physics is. Physics doesn't know what 90% of the universe is made of, approximately. It's dark matter and dark energy. Well, those are nice words, but nobody knows what dark matter and dark energy are. Right. They don't know what 90% or almost 90% of the universe is made of. Right. Right. People like to use science to say, well, the ETs can't get here because nothing can go faster than the speed of light. and say you would be too old by the time you got here. You can't make a spaceship that big. The fact of the matter is, within relativity, there are these things called the Lorentz transformations. When you're going very close to the speed of light, time slows down and the apparent distances become shorter. So if you get very close to the speed of light in your spaceship, it will seem to you like going 5 light years took 5 days or 5 weeks, depending on how close to the speed of light you are. To someone on Earth, it will seem like it took you 5 years within theory of relativity. But for you on the spaceship, it's a very short trip. Why isn't that possible? If you can get close to the speed of light. I'm not even talking about going faster than the speed of light, which may also be possible. I'm not even talking about wormholes, which are also possible within physics. And we're certainly not talking about teleportation, which some people say there have been experiments by Earth people using technology, not just consciousness, to achieve. So yeah, so within within science as we know it, yeah, they can get here. Within science as we don't know it yet, yeah, they can almost certainly get here.
Right.
I mean, it takes a ridiculous amount of arrogance to think that the science that we've developed over the last 100 years is all there is, and that in the next 100 years we're not going to discover 10 times as much.
Right. But it's amazing how humans, a lot of them think that way, though. They really do.
Yeah. It's human psychology. There have been time after time in science, somebody will come up with a new theory. He will be just
vilified,
derided, vilified. Continental drift. The people that came up with continental drift. That theory got accepted only after a great deal of effort, mapping the oceans, mapping the ocean floor, and showing that here's this big thing down the middle of the ocean floor. You look on either side, and the magnetic changes on either side of that rift are the same in either direction. And but people said, "Oh no, it can't. The continents, they can't possibly move." Well, they do. But I forget who said it, but a lot of progress in science happens as people, as the old guard dies and new people come in to.
No, it's true. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
With new ideas, because people get attached to scientific theory the same way they get attached to anything else, whether it's religion or whatever your belief system is, and these things become belief systems for people.
Right.
It's just the way we are. So hopefully, it doesn't take a lot of bad nature for a scientist to deny that the UFOs can fly using gravitational propulsion, or that they can even get here. It just takes the normal human psychology and pride in what you know.
Right. And then you add in tenure and not wanting to lose your job. So the politics of it.
Well, there's that. Yeah. Well, yeah. Nobody that looks into this subject is going to be funded. So. Right.
Exactly. Right. Jeff, I'll tell you, this has been really fun. Thank you. Thanks again for being so insightful and clarifying some things for our listeners. The work you're doing is very important, and again, that's why we want to help to get the word out, and we will continue to do that. And we wish you all the luck in the world, and we'll keep in touch as well. And when there are new developments, whether it's another book or there are other things that are going on, we'd love to have you back on the show.
Well, thanks, and thanks for having me on the show, and it's been great talking to you. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and we'll hope to have you back again soon.
Great.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.